Thank you very much, Neil, and thanks for the invitation to talk to you tonight, and thanks everybody for turning up virtually as we now do these days. In Liz we trust, which is a very nice play on words. I did a tweet I remember a few years ago when she was Justice Secretary, where she was struggling to get backing for one proposal or another, and pointed out that it's slightly paradoxical that she's called Truss given she's got no support. Which was a nice little gag that made it into the Times diary. But I suspect that she who laughs last laughs loudest. And of course, nobody, I think, suspected Liz Truss was prime ministerial material, I think, if we're being honest about it. And anyway, here we are. If you just allow me just to give a few reflections on who she is and what she faces, and then I'll come on to my kind of area in terms of what this potentially means for Northern Ireland, if you'll permit me. Just as a pen portrait, she's now obviously the third female prime minister, the third Conservative female prime minister, which is probably quite significant. And she hammered that point home to Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions this afternoon. She's also the fourth prime minister in 6 years, and you've got to go an awful long way back to find anything comparable. It was common in the 18th century for prime ministers to kind of come and go, but that's usually as a result of things like dysentery and syphilis rather than anything else. It's very unusual in our modern system that we've had so many prime ministers, and it's a mark of the kind of Brexit fallout and the fact that these outworkings, these aftershocks, are still causing massive problems. To be fair to Liz Truss, she's the first comprehensive school educated PM, which I think is noteworthy, given we've had comprehensive schools for the best part of 60 years. She's done 8 years in the cabinet in 4 departments, which again, she's been around for quite a while, and she's the only Conservative cabinet minister pre-Brexit. So she was there with the Cameroons, and then with Theresa May, and then of course with Boris. So she's as I say, she's the last woman standing, really. She's obviously some people describe as a shapeshifter, which is not a polite way of describing anybody, I suspect. However, she's an ex-Remainer who is now an ardent Brexiteer, and an ex-Liberal Democrat who is now a right-wing Tory. And I had to sort of smile when she obviously visited the Queen at Balmoral to seek permission to form a government yesterday. This is the same monarch that, as a student Liberal Democrat, she wanted to abolish. So pragmatism is a key, I think, aspect of Liz Truss's game. Interestingly, Mark Littlewood from the Institute of Economic Affairs, who used to be the head of media for the Liberal Democrats, wrote an interesting piece in Europe University and said, like her, he's been on exactly the same journey from Liberal Democrat activist to some figure on the right in his case. But like himself, he said Liz Truss has been effectively consistent that she is an old-fashioned economic liberal, and that's first and foremost the key to kind of understanding her. Just very quickly, if I may, I made a few notes this afternoon just on the in tray. It's the in tray of death in terms of any prime minister, I suspect. It's the worst inheritance I think any prime minister's had probably since the war. And often I think the case is that when you're prime minister and you take over from another government, you can kind of contextualise some of the problems you inherit. But of course, the Conservatives have been in power for 12 years, and Liz Truss has been in the cabinet for 8 of those. Just very, very quickly, Bank of England today, a recession is now unavoidable. We've got predictions of 5 quarters of negative economic growth, a deep recession, rising interest rates, inflation set to hit 18%, stagnant wages, the lowest since the Industrial Revolution. We still have massive regional inequalities that are still to be dealt with. We've got the kind of post-Brexit malaise in our relations with the European Union. We've obviously got the issue I'll come back to shortly on the Northern Ireland Protocol and relations as well with the United States. We've got the situation on the beaches of the south of England with migration and the Rwanda policy, which Liz Truss appears to be doubling down on. We've got predictions, widespread predictions from the police and from lots of commentators of social unrest, given the state of the economy and where things are heading. We've got effectively the collapse of the National Health Service in so many respects, impossible to get GPs appointments. I phoned an ambulance a few weeks ago for a man I saw have an accident, and it took 1 hour and 10 minutes for somebody to arrive. This is a man bleeding with a head injury. So we've got big problems in the NHS. Social care financing is going to re-emerge as a problem, given Liz Truss's commitment to reverse national insurance rise. So that brings that problem back into sharp focus. We obviously have the energy crisis, which is kind of front and centre, but both in terms of immediate cost reduction. We'll see what she comes up with tomorrow, but also slightly longer term production and storage capacity, which has been a problem for British energy policy for a very long time, and it's of course very hard to turn around in the short term. And of course, we have the rolling crisis in Ukraine and where all that might lead. And then underpinning some of this, which I'll turn to in a minute, is the future of the union, which is not, I suspect, in great nick. So just very quickly then on Northern Ireland and the Union. Now, so far, Liz Truss hasn't mentioned in her remarks on the steps at Downing Street, which is essentially your one chance to set the tone in the early days of your premiership. She's not mentioned Northern Ireland yet, which has been noted in some of the Northern Ireland media. She's appointed Chris Heaton-Harris as the 24th Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Again, there was quite a lot of speculation in the media, including some of the right-wing papers, that this role was being passed over periodically. Penny Mordaunt was apparently offered the role, Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javid, they all turned it down, and it's fallen to Chris Heaton-Harris to take that forward. She's also dispensed with the services of Conor Burns, who was a Minister of State, who has this sort of almost curiosity of being actually from Northern Ireland, and I think a lot of people, even way beyond the Conservative tribe, would regard him as somebody that at least has the place at heart. He's been removed, and this evening Steve Baker, the former leader of the European Research Group of Conservative MPs, the ultra Brexiteers, the Spartans, has been made Minister of State there. There's been no invocation so far of our precious union, which was Theresa May's formulation for speaking about the union, or talk of our four nations, which has been Boris Johnson's way of describing it. But it will be at the front of her mind, because she met yesterday with President Biden, and his people were very keen to point out that he did raise the issue of the protocol and the situation in Northern Ireland with her directly. So this will be rising, I think, to the top of her in tray, and Chris Heaton-Harris will have his work cut out, and he's got two things to do. One is to restore devolution, which has been mothballed since the start of 2022 because the DUP pulled out of the power sharing arrangement, so that the Assembly can't sit and appoint a speaker, and the executive can't be formed, because of course it requires the commitment of Sinn Féin and the DUP to be able to form an executive, and the DUP simply refused to do so because of the ongoing issue, which is the second issue, with the resolution of the Northern Ireland Protocol row. And of course the protocol is the part of the Brexit withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson signed up to, and Lord Frost, David Frost, first of all negotiated, then agreed, and then opposed, and eventually quit the cabinet over. So the protocol is a pretty tortuous zero-sum equation. The European Union is pretty consistent in its view that there's got to be border arrangements somewhere, because of course the land border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and the potential for goods exported from Britain to Northern Ireland to enter the single market. Now, of course, the big claim of Brexit, and Brexiteers would make this claim, is that it requires regulatory divergence from the European Union. So the European Union's view is, look, you're not bringing, to put it bluntly, your hooky goods in via Northern Ireland into Ireland, and then on potentially into the single market. So there's a kind of realpolitik to the EU's position. Britain's position and the Conservatives' position clearly is that it puts a sea border between two parts of the United Kingdom, which for Unionists is a massive issue of principle. They don't like the idea that Northern Ireland is treated differently, except I could rattle off probably 50 different ways in which Northern Ireland is treated differently to the rest of the United Kingdom. So there's an element of kind of selective memory with some Unionists. But what's happened within political unionism over the course of the last 2 years is that it's been yanked to the right. Now you roll back a couple of years and you'll find figures and you find quotes all over the internet from people like Arlene Foster and Jeffrey Donaldson, making the best of the protocol arrangements, that it provides the best of both worlds for Northern Ireland. It gives it access to the UK single market and the European Union single market. And of course, that's very much the view of the business community in Northern Ireland, which sees these opportunities and is currently realising them. But that's the economics, and the politics in Northern Ireland are seldom in the same place. So immediately, Liz Truss and Christine Harris have a deadline looming of the 16th of September to respond to the European Union over infringement proceedings that it launched against the British government following publication of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill back in June. So this is the bill that rescinds huge chunks of the Northern Ireland Protocol arbitrarily, and basically the EU's gone up the wall about this. Boris Johnson described the bill on his visit to Northern Ireland after the elections as insurance. Now, what I think he meant by that is that this is effectively performative legislation. That what the British government is trying to do is to reopen deeper negotiations with the European Union and play the ball past Maros Šefčovič, who is the European Commission's vice president in charge of the negotiations about resolving the protocol impasse. Now they want to kind of open this up and get more concessions than Šefčovič is able to give, given he's obviously a delegate from the member states. So the bill is a blunt tool, but the European Union has obviously taken that as a raising of the stakes, and as I say, invoked these proceedings, these infringement proceedings, which the British government is obliged to respond to within the next couple of weeks. So that's led to speculation that Liz Truss may trigger Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is a kind of a sort of pressure release valve clause, which allows there to be a period of negotiation if the implications and the delivery of the protocol causes problems for either side. So there may be some movement to do that, although the latest briefings that seem to be coming from her team are that she won't do that. So there's lots of mixed signals at the moment. Steve Baker being appointed would perhaps indicate that Liz Truss is gearing up for a ruck with the European Union, given Steve Baker is pretty clear and pretty consistent in his politics. Wrong in my opinion, but there you go. He's at least consistent. So the kind of optics of this at the moment are that the government is gearing up for a scrap with the European Union, or potentially this is going to be one last push against the door to see if anything gives before actually they rescind and actually get back into serious negotiations and try and resolve this issue. Because of course the prospect of deeper retaliatory measures by the European Union, a so-called trade war, now starts to sort of come into focus. The Americans are furious about all of this. They see this undermining the Good Friday Agreement settlement, and they're very, very worried about the politics of it, and very, very angry about it. And of course, we're heading into midterm elections in the US. That's one thing, but it's the potential for these retaliatory measures from the European Union, which we could turn Kent into the biggest car park in the world, probably visible from space in about 6 hours. So I described it to somebody the other day that Liz Truss is potentially trying to perform Riverdance on a frozen lake. It's inadvisable to kind of go down this road, simply because Britain has far more to lose. We start with, an economy facing a potentially fairly deep recession with lots of structural problems, and this is a problem you can resolve. Now, being in government is all about getting problems off your desk. It's all about, there's going to be fresh problems next week. Get rid of the ones today that you can. And there is the outline of a deal that is there. It has been there for months. That the European Union and the Irish government put forward a series of proposals that they've worked up with the business community in Northern Ireland in October 2021, which I think would go a long way to address some of the issues of making exporting from Britain into Northern Ireland an awful lot easier, getting rid of half of the paperwork and speeding up checks. So there has been the basis of a deal for quite some time, and what we've seen is effectively a lack of concentration on behalf of British negotiators. Lord Frost, in particular, may actually better to describe him as Lord Permafrost, given his kind of reputation in the European Union. Can't stand the guy. He's caused, I think, a lot of problems by making this ideological, and all politics eventually comes down to a deal. And if you let ideology get in the way of that, then you're on a hiding to nothing. And I think that's pretty much the government's position. So it may be Liz Truss is thinking, look, one last shove at this, trying to play hardball before actually falling back, and then let's cut a deal. And I suspect that's the way it will go, simply because, as I say, she has got so much in the in tray that the Northern Ireland Protocol situation is surmountable. It's difficult, and it will involve probably letting unionists down yet again. There's lessons there for them. But I think if the choreography can be arranged, that actually the concessions that are already on the table, with a few more that could be negotiated with some goodwill, might be enough to convince the middle ground of political unionism that actually it can kind of accept these deals, and perhaps a few more baubles here and there, as well as some extra investment in Northern Ireland and all the rest of it. But this issue has been allowed to drift for 2 years. I mean, this has been disastrously managed by the Northern Ireland office, by Brandon Lewis as the Northern Ireland secretary, I think in particular, and Lord Frost's, he sounds like a sort of subpar Marvel villain. His contribution has been just deleterious to everybody, I think, but it can be fixed. And I think Liz Truss's instincts will be, I think, when she has a proper briefing from her permanent secretaries on all the problems that she faces, may be to say, actually, this is one problem, bit difficult, but this is one problem that I actually can resolve. So I think that's pretty much the state of play at the moment. I'll pause there.